By the time we get to Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw, all sense of reality and drama, well, not all, but a lot, has been taken away from the series. I discussed this in my Fate and the Furious review about how the franchise continues to try to top itself at the cost of any real drama. And it becomes a thing where at one time these were pretty fun little popcorn movies, and they still are to a degree. Now they've become like mindless fun popcorn movie. I'm not gonna hate on these movies, but I kind of really prefer what they did in 5 and 6 more than where it went. Like I like action movies, and I like them even more if they have good lore. Like the Terminator movies, the Rambo movies, even the Transporter movies all have some pretty good lore behind it. And the Fast movies have built up their own lore. The problem is the farther away we get from the more grounded Fast 4 and Fast 5, the more insane things get. And they step it up quite a bit in this movie. I remember when I saw the trailer and I saw Idris Elba literally look and behave like a supervillain. Like he's literally a supervillain in this movie. It's like, and when I say a supervillain, I mean like from a comic book. You know, I felt like some of the latter Fast and Furious films were kind of like over the top Bond films. There's a lot of James Bond in these, especially 8. 8 felt like a James Bond plot, easily, except with, of course, Dominic Toretto as James Bond. Here we have a movie that this film, Hobbs and Shaw, acts more like a transporter film than a movie with The Rock. Granted, they do go to Samoa. Roman Reigns is there having a cameo in the third act, which, to be honest, I wasn't even expecting because the way this movie's structured, there's a big action sequence at the end of every act. And after the one in Act 2, I really sat there and I thought, okay, the movie's over. Like, you think it's over because you've gotten a little over, what, an hour and a half, hour and 45, wherever. The second half, just 2/3 of the film. You could have stopped it there and everybody would have gone home happy. But the movie tries to kind of drag along farther in the last third, and it really does kind of lose me. This movie would have greatly benefited if it were cut short and if it were a bit more streamlined. Either way, the thing about this movie is if this is your first Fast and Furious movie, you're going to think the entire franchise is like this. So if you start with this one and then go back to the first one, you won't really know who Hobbs and Shaw are, but you'll think the whole franchise is this kind of John Wick level complete mayhem. That's where we're at right now. This has now become like John Wick meets like an evil Iron Man in this movie. And had it not been for the incredible charisma behind Dwayne Johnson as Hobbs and Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw and Idris Elba as the villain, this movie would have totally lost me. But either way, even putting that aside, those three guys have a lot of charisma, no doubt about it. In fact, they're all stars. Every one of them is stars. And on top of that, besides just those actors, this movie also has cameo appearances from Ryan Reynolds. Kevin Hart is in this movie. I mentioned Roman Reigns already, and Helen Mirren plays the den mother of the Shaws. Unfortunately, Owen Shaw wasn't in this one, but maybe the next one, we'll see. But even with that charisma, like I mentioned, the movie really needed to be cut short. The final sequence looked like something totally taken out of one of the latter Rambo movies, but it was I found myself laughing at this point. Like I found myself, there were things in the last two Fast movies that made me laugh like crazy, 7 and 8. But here with this one, I was laughing because it's so over the top. I mean, there's a part in this movie where it almost seems like The Rock is pulling on a chain to hold a helicopter in place. Like these have now gotten literally like superheroes. Like the Hulk, the Rock is basically the Hulk in this movie. I mean, in the last movie, in Fast 8, you saw him rip this like seat out of the wall and then curl it. It's insane. And you saw him like break through a cast in 7, by flexing. Here, it's all that plus more, and yet in one scene, both of them get knocked out by getting hit with the butt of a rifle. I mean, it's just, wow, okay. So besides those three actors and the cameo appearances I mentioned, a third Shaw sibling is introduced in this movie. Vanessa Kirby plays Hattie Shaw, and she's kind of like the centerpiece of the movie. Like the whole plot kind of revolves around her existence. I really like how early in the movie they had like the split screen of Hobbs and Shaw waking up and their morning routine and kind of showing how they're different for their eventual team up. And of course, they do team up in the movie to try go after Idris Elba and his secret boss. So it's still kind of left open for a sequel, although apparently according to what I read, like this movie didn't do so well, or it didn't do as well as they wanted it to. Granted, it came out in 2019, which was a huge movie year, especially for Marvel. Marvel killed it in 2019. You know, that the Endgame carried the whole year, plus Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, which, you know, wasn't that good but had a lot of hype. It was the last of the Skywalker saga, so they really pushed it. This movie might have got caught, like, you know, in between a rock and a hard place. But either way, maybe people are tired of it. I mean, I don't know, because Fast 9 apparently did pretty well, even though it came out shortly after the pandemic, which, by the way, I'll be reviewing next. But with this movie, I guess that Hattie Shaw is going to be part of the universe now. I guess the Shaw family itself is still going to be involved. I hope they make a Shaw Brothers movie later on down the road. But when it comes to this movie, yeah, apparently a sequel's been like on hold or on ice because maybe The Rock's too busy with other things. I don't know. The only thing that's unfortunate is things have changed quite a bit since the old, you know, since Fast 5, because at this point when this movie came out, Vin Diesel and The Rock were at the height of their feud, and Rock wanted to keep playing Luke Hobbs, so he got his own spin-off, which is this movie. Meanwhile, F9 didn't have The Rock in it at all, and apparently F10 doesn't either, even though I have suspicions that he'll be back in the franchise. I have this weird feeling that, because apparently it was resolved between them, that he'll be back. So, Hobbs and Shaw was written by Chris Morgan. I think this is the last Fast movie that he wrote, because he didn't write 9. And Drew Pearce. And it's directed by David Leitch. I never really know how to pronounce his name, but the same guy who did Atomic Blonde and the guy who did John Wick. Although he was uncredited with Chad Stahelski, the other guy who did John Wick, he apparently did help. So I guess he has a history. I mean, he also did Violent Night, which I reviewed here on the channel. You know, well, he didn't, I think he produced that one. He didn't direct it. But anyways, this guy knows action, and it was over the top, complete insanity. I mean, I enjoy the madness of, like, the hand-to-hand combat, which I like how, you know, Hobbs and Shaw have different styles. Even the sister even has different style, and so does Idris Elba. And it was just a bit too, like, I don't want to say they went too far with this. I can't really say because I'm almost expecting it to be like this from now on, and I think it will be. But I think even with Fate of the Furious, they kind of went too far. So there's no point complaining about that with every movie. Some people love it they went too far, and quite frankly, I do too. Like I mentioned before, it's just that in this universe, it's changed. I mean, this franchise went from being super realistic to action movie kind of realistic to now we're going into superhero movie territory. Like, we're almost teetering here. We've got James Bond and like action hero 80s superstar territory for a lot of these, and, you know, crazy kung fu, Jackie Chan, insane stunts kind of stuff, right? Now we're going into superhero stuff, especially with F9, because from what I understand, there's a conversation in that movie about these characters being like superheroes. And we're there. I mean, we're now 10 movies deep, including Hobbs and Shaw. And, of course, 10 is actually the 11th one, so 11 will be 12, and whatever else comes out down the pipeline. Yeah, it's a lot. But overall, like, I had fun with this one, but it's definitely a one and done. Like, it's a movie that I have no desire to see again, just being honest with you. I thought the first 2 acts of the movie were pretty good. Should have ended it there, to be honest. The 3rd act was not really necessary. The Rock, Hobbs was not a Samoan. The Rock is a Samoan. Hobbs is not. But yet there are so many things in this movie. Like the fact that The Rock does the people's elbow, and they literally discuss The Rock doing the people's, like, not the people's elbow, the people's eyebrow. The Rock does the people's eyebrow. And the daughter even discusses it, and he even says turn it sideways that The Rock used to. Like, everything, like, it really was more like a fake biography of The Rock, dude. They go back to Samoa, like, it's like a fake biography of The Rock. Whereas Luke Hobbs, I mean, they never really told you what his ethnicity was. And even if he was Samoan, he didn't act like this in the old movie, so it just doesn't really fit. This series is a train wreck at this point, no pun intended, even though there was almost one in the first movie. And these movies are now becoming ones and dones. Like, I enjoyed them, but there are other action films that I would enjoy more, and including ones in this very own franchise. So I think when I watch through these again, maybe I'll only watch 4 and 5 and maybe 6, because that's the peak. Now we're going into, like, It's okay. Saw it. It was fun, but don't need to see it again. Take care, y'all. Up next, F9, The Fast Saga. Let's go.